In the light of the protests around the world, sharing the message, Black Lives Matter, it's clear that we still have much work to do as we try to live with one another in our diversity. The instructions Jesus gives in today's Gospel to those 12 disciples might at first seem to be at odds with what we know about him. Go nowhere among the Gentiles, he says, and enter no town of the Samaritans. Does he really mean that the good news of the kingdom should not be shared with foreigners? Fortunately, we know the good news did spread beyond Israel. We also know that this was done with the blessing of Jesus. In St. Matthew's Gospel, he tells them, "Go and make disciples of all nations." In his ministry, Jesus never excluded those outside the Jewish faith. On the contrary, he healed a Roman centurion's servant and Samaritan lepers, and discussed theology with a Samaritan woman. Women, foreigners, even outcasts. Nobody was outside the scope of his love. So why in today's reading does he tell the disciples to go only to the lost sheep of Israel? Why just the Jewish people, who had frequently lost sight of God's loving promise to them, worshipping idols or turning faith into lists of petty rules? Well, you need to start somewhere, I suppose, and it's best to start with what or who you know. Even Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles, began with the Jewish community in those places he visited. And it was only after they rejected the good news did he turn to the Gentiles. And of those 12 disciples, we know from elsewhere in the Gospel that Andrew first told his brother Peter about Jesus, and Philip told his friend Nathanael. They started with those who were closest to them. What did they tell? In the words of Jesus, the good news that the kingdom has come near. But words were not enough. Those disciples were instructed to heal and help just as Jesus had. Only a living, loving relationship with Jesus can really mark us out as Christians, wherever we come from. As disciples, Jesus sends us to proclaim the best of all good news, that in Jesus himself the kingdom of heaven has come near. His life, ministry, teaching, death and resurrection prove how much God loves us. In Jesus, who was born and died as a human, the God of heaven and earth, all the earth, has come near to us. And so, beginning with those closest to us, we are sent to share the good news in what we do as well as in what we say. The good news helps us to love all our neighbours as ourselves, because we're sharing our love for Jesus and God's love for us all, however little we may think we deserve it. As G.K. Chesterton once said, "You matter, I matter, we matter to God. God only knows why." Amen.